Alrighty then, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 2 of Let's Talk Trackmania, your new weekly rendezvous where we talk everything that touches to our beloved license, be it competitive side or the more general side. I am Thomas Mengozi, aka GGeek, and accompanying me yet again for tonight is now becoming part of your familiar roster, Eirik Holdal and Paul Gillies, aka Scottie. How are you doing, gentlemen?
Doing very fine. I had a good day, had a day off today, and time to talk about more Trackmania with two lovely folks such as yourself, so I certainly won't complain.
Yeah, I had an exam today, went to shit, so I'm ready to forget about that and talk about something I might actually know about.
Yeah, of course, trying to make your day feel better. So, we've got a couple of interesting subjects, and yeah, I feel like we're gonna start to give you a bit of rundown of the summary. First up is gonna be Scottie, who is gonna be talking about the various server issues that have been plaguing Trackmania as of, well, ever since Maniaplanet 4 released, if we want to be pedantic, but that have been particularly hitting hard in the past few weeks, especially with the Game War Duo Cup being affected, and also the DDE 24-hour World event being ultimately cancelled. Then it's going to be up to Eirik in a somewhat transitional open subject, which is what is Trackmania currently missing, which is going to be interesting to see, and we also want to hear the opinion of you guys during the subject. And finally, I will close it off with a little bit of a look into the speedrun scene that is actually getting quite a bit of activity, and also the presentation, a little bit of a somewhat wacky game in the Trackmania series. I'm pretty sure you guys know already where this is going, but I'll keep it up for later. I think we are ready to get started, and thus, off to you, Scottie, for your first subject.
For sure, thank you very much. So the subject I thought I would bring to the attention of the Trackmania community is, although I'm sure all of you guys have discussed this at length yourself, but to kind of unite these discussions under one point is the evolution of how Trackmania, at least through its Maniaplanet iterations, has came through with Maniaplanet 4, which was released only a few short years ago, and how that has affected the Trackmania Trackmania 2 community over the last few years, what that has meant for some different events of which we've played, what that has brought to the game, and also, of course, perhaps even what that means for the future. So, for those of you who don't know, of course, at the very least, when I started playing Trackmania, it was on, as it was called, Maniaplanet 3. As it was, you may remember some even small visual cues from it. Some of your blocks that were in nowadays were no longer part of it.
UI and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. New UI. There was much more prevalent Ramstein bugs and things like that, as they're affectionately known. And yeah, there was a lot of different server controllers, although that's coming into more community-made efforts and things like that. But to get on to the main part of the story before I digress, of course, being Maniaplanet 4, this is an update that was released, if my memory serves me correctly, just in the tail end of 2017, I believe it was, start of 2018. And it was an update that was primarily pushed towards dealing with some bugs which had been in the game for quite some time, giving a UI update as well as a kind of fresh face to Trackmania and, well, Maniaplanet in general, of course, bringing the Shootmania umbrella inside it. So we had things coming into the game like channels, we had new map editors coming in, we saw the mesh modeler blocks getting their time in the sun, so to speak. We saw efforts, as we were saying, to get rid of some of the Ramstein bugs that we're talking about previously, as well as some new interesting features like magnet blocks and things like that. That was, again, bringing some new elements to a lot of different places of the game, of which we had not seen previously. But when Maniaplanet 4 actually came into the game, we saw a few improvements. As I said, we saw a reduction in some of the bugs of which we at least initially thought. We saw some introductions of new ones. Of course, one of my at least favourite things from the Maniaplanet update was the introduction of the channel system, at the very least allowing people a little bit of a taste or a teaser, so to speak, of the different environments of Trackmania. Say, for example, people who had never tried Canyon, Valley, things like that, and also a chance to try the likes of Shootmania and all its different environments while not having to worry about paying for a full license, when you could just go on and try with your friends in multiple different game modes and kind of take it from there. But why we bring up Maniaplanet 4 is unfortunately not for a lot of the things that went right. It's about some of the things that rather it courted kind of controversy coming in with new bugs that were introduced to the game, maybe not introduced, but more highlighted with the game, such as mid-road bugs were affectionately more discovered throughout the release of Maniaplanet 4. It was discovered that while there was a reduction in Ramstein bugs, they were not eradicated overall. And also the amount of issues this kind of brought into the grand scheme of Trackmania in terms of how it affected events. Now, of course, some of you may remember, and some of you may have played, of course, in the multiple kind of endurance race series we've had over the years. I'm sure we've covered some at the very least in some episodes gone past in different podcasts and such. But for those who are not aware, we've had multi-races held by the likes of Frostbill, we've had multi-races held by the likes of Spam, G4S are holding one actually concurrently at the moment, and I believe Spam's running some tests again.
Yeah,
but
he's,
I mean,
to actually go off on your point, so yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but yeah, Spam is indeed hosting lap races again, but this time he's actually limiting the number of players to 100 with the subscribers having priority. This is how it actually works, and it's races every Saturday at 5 o'clock on each Saturday, and it's for Spam subscribers that have priority. And after that, he's still kind of wondering whether or not he is opening the server up to other people to join in. That's another question that we're not going to have an answer to for now.
Yeah, for sure. But the main, of course, through at least Maniaplanet 3's iteration, when we had the Frostbill's weekly race, when we had the early days of at least Spam's weekly race, the servers were able to run relatively instant free, of course, out with some normal kind of issues we've seen through the history of Trackmania, red times, invalid times, and so on. People having issues loading all the things on the map and such. But the main issues we'd focus on, at least that Maniaplanet 4 brought in, is the lap script. Now, for those who aren't familiar with the endurance race concept, normally it's a 2 to 3 minute long map incorporating the different styles of stadiums. So you've got the technical parts, you've got dirt parts, full speed parts, and RPG parts, in whatever mix of which the map has decided to go into. And it will be on a set number of laps, say 15 for example's sake, to give it an event which roughly between 30 and 45 minutes. So of course the players will be racing on track for a straight 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how long the event's going to be. And normally it attracted a very large amount of players, much along the likes of, you see the Trackmania talent, or True Talent Cups, pardon me, where it attracts northwards of 100 people at the very least for each sort of week which came in. So as you said, these ran relatively flawlessly, at least as you could expect for Trackmania back in Maniaplanet 3. However, in Maniaplanet 4 we saw increased issues, especially in Spam's weekly race when he attempted to host these, with repeatedly seeing after a certain amount of time that it appeared to be that a lot of players were having their timer disrupted. They were having invalid time, so they would no longer be able to complete it. And we saw some really bizarre bugs, which yours truly actually suffered from, where you would be going through checkpoints and your car would be going to a quarter of its normal size, which had never really been seen before.
And
in
a high-pitched sound. In fact, there is a famous clip by, it was Big Man Taxon, if we want to be exact, that actually experienced that firsthand in the last ever race before, for the last 2.5 years at least, where basically we could hear the engine sound, which was Tyler 1's imitating a car movement, and then all of a sudden it gained like an octave. All of a sudden, just after crossing a checkpoint, it went from and you can see the car actually reducing in size to a quarter, and Taxon's reaction is just priceless. I don't have the clip under my belt right now, so I can't play it, but it's actually you can actually search it. I think it's called Small Man Taxon, as a matter of fact, the clip on Twitch.
I was the very first person that happened to on stream, at the very least.
Oh, okay.
I remember I was doing one of the Spam weekly races and it happened to me, and having never seen it before, as of course this hadn't happened to someone, at least as far as my knowledge, before. And at the very least, even if it did, it wasn't caught on camera, so to speak. So that was quite a terrifying surprise to me, especially trying to drive that in the middle of an event. But I digress a little bit. But again, onto the issues which Maniaplanet Planet 4 brought for these sort of, shall we say, high volume events. So a lot of people on a kind of long event that's going along at the same time. So we saw a lot of people disconnecting, a lot of people getting invalid times, and generally it severely inhibited the ability of these tournaments to actually even go on, which we've seen. And the times gone by, unfortunately, back then, Spam decided to cancel his weekly race as a result, although it's coming back in kind of various iterations when he's tried to at least bring up the testing front through the last year or so to try and at least get something rolling again for his fans and the fans of the event itself. But recently we've seen both server issues and issues just regarding getting the plugin working, claiming a lot more events through the years that seem to bring a big halt to the DDE events. Of course, through I believe they attempted to do their first 24-hour race in quite a long time, just a month or two ago there, as they were having trouble reworking their plugin to suit the new update for Maniaplanet 4. So it's not just as simple as it's just caused some issues for tournaments even having when they're going into their events, and not all players are even able to get on track. It's about the rework that a lot of these places who use custom plugins have had to go through. I believe, if I remember correctly, the staff which Mass had surrounding themselves attempted to revive the kind of Spartan Cup format, which, if you might remember, for quite some time ago. But again, that was very difficult due to the issues had because of the Maniaplanet 4 rework. But recently we've seen with the new, well, I suppose it's not a new update anymore, we've had time to kind of dissect it and see what the issues had, but recently it was more in the news that the 24-hour race had to shut down for the first time ever in the middle of its event there. Very unfortunate, of course, despite the best efforts of the kind of collective Trackmania community behind the scenes. We had Draconia admins getting involved, admins from all across the different sides of Trackmania trying to get involved to keep this event going, but we've seen adjustments coming in from DDE to try and make the event more suitable with the tools they have. But unfortunately, as you'll see the statement coming up there from the lovely host himself, DDE had to, for the first time ever, cancel their event, which, I mean, at least history's shown us that they were able to host events relatively more stable in Trackmania 3, and Maniaplanet 3, and we've also seen that claiming some other events recently. We've seen some server issues plaguing Game War Duo Cup, if I remember correctly.
Although
but
it must be said that for the Game War Duo Cup, it wasn't actually the dedicated server of Maniaplanet per se that caused issues. It was just that the servers that were picked at first for the organization of the event were not actually able to hold up sufficiently with the amount of players that the Game War Duo Cup was actually receiving. So yeah, they decided to delay it by 2 weeks. Instead of taking place on April 26th, it took place on May the 9th and May the 10th, so that they could actually get beefier servers to actually accommodate as much players as they could.
Fair. But at least coming in with this Maniaplanet 4 update, we've seen a great amount of issues being brought, despite the number of fixes they done, the amount of kind of new features of which they brought into the kind of framework that they already have. It's kind of been, it's given as well as it's taken, in the sense that it's gave quite a good bit to the Trackmania community, but it's also taken a good bit away from the Trackmania community. But we have had statements from Hillis, at the very least most recently, in a conversation with another community member, Buzzy, although albeit in French. However, you guys will be able to check it out if you check out Hillis's Twitter page, where he discusses how the lap script, especially, it's based upon, if I recall correctly, issues with a very, very old code, which is proving for them very difficult to rework, and it's proving very difficult for them to debug, which has resulted in what a lot of people have felt a lack of care coming from the deal, which they were very quick to dismiss. But it's led to a kind of sour attitude from the Trackmania community with the amount of issues that Maniaplanet 4 has caused, which a lot of people were just simply saying, why not roll it back? But, I mean, what do you guys think about that?
You want to start out, Eirik?
Sure, I guess everybody agrees that this is not a situation we want. If you look at the history of Trackmania is existing at the moment, at least as a popular game within the community because of the community. The community is the reason for going through the years 2016, 2017, when the Nadeo stepped down and didn't want to host ESWC anymore. The community has always been there. They always hosted events for the players that are within the community. So when popular events like Frostbules Weekly or Spams Weekly are not able to go further, that may, let's say that was my favorite event, and now I cannot play it anymore, then some players might quit. Let's say that Spam hosted some other tournaments along with this tournament, but that was his favorite tournament, then maybe he will quit as an organizer. So just some small problems can lead to bigger problems, and that is not an ideal situation. And yeah, an argument that is always brought up once Serator is hosting his cup, he got new blocks, he got everything suited for his cup. So the argument is given that, let's say that he hosted in lap script, then Nadeo would actually do it and then they would fix it. I'm not sure about that. I'm not spoken to nobody in Nadeo about why is this not fixed yet, and I'm far too stupid to understand how advanced that coding is. So the server side of it, and certainly the lap script, is what is taking a big hit. But I also want to just point out that it's a positive implementation, because now it's less bugs in. We don't have the Ramstein bug anymore. So if I look at the competitions I care the most about and I follow the most, which is taking place in cup mode, then I would say Maniaplanet 4 is, in my personal view, a good update, but I can certainly see why it's a bad update at the moment, and I hope that it's not going to be the same problems once we get into the new Trackmania. And I don't really hope that they are going to focus too much about fixing this lap script at the moment, when it's just 1.5 months left of Maniaplanet 4.
Yeah, now to chip in on what you said about the fact that some of the people's favorite competitions being completely cancelled because of the server issues making players quit. Well, I can actually speak for myself. That was my case. When I started up playing Trackmania Stadium back in 2015, where I somewhat took grip to the game, it was mostly to play Frostbule races or Spams races a little bit later when he took the house, because those were my favorite kind of events. To be fair, I was shit at tech. I'm still shit at tech. I was shit at dirt. I'm still shit at dirt. You know, I'm kind of like the average pleb of Trackmania that just want to actually pick up the game and have a good time. And I feel like being from more traditional racing game background, where I'm mostly used to do laps around the circuit rather than actually play rounds from point A to point B, I felt like the FB's Weekly and the Spams Weekly was really what suited me, and so I took the game. I actually eventually got better and better. I got to the top 40s and top 30s at one point, and then when the events started to get canceled because of the network issues that arose with MP4, I didn't really take a liking to actually play the game all that much again, because even though I experimented with tech, for instance, I did try out to actually take in competitions and whatever, I still feel like it wasn't really what I wanted to do. So then, of course, then real life came in with the studies, and so yeah, pretty much the game kind of flunked. But yeah, also, yeah, I do like the fact to the theory of Zerator having everything tailored for his cup. I feel like it's just a bit of, what do we call, I don't have the word in English, we call this mauvaise foi in French, basically. It's basically extrapolating way too much on a wrongdoing of somebody impacting the rest of the community. I feel like it's not the mindset that we should actually adopt, and we are more, I'm more thinking like, it's something that they're aware of, and Helios explained himself that since it's based on very old code, it's probably not really worth the hassle to actually go ahead and debug in this, and it would actually sap all the momentum of the studio whilst they're actually developing in the new game, which again comes in around a month and a half. So I like to believe that it was something that they put on the back burner, but then they felt like it was way too old to actually work on anything. So eventually it kind of got discarded and improvised at the new game. But other than that, I really do hope that they are going to be working on a fresh code base. Although I do have a bit of web development skills, it's not anywhere game related, so I have no idea how the netcode of a game like Trackmania could work. But yeah, I really hope that they are going to be looking into it at one point and actually address this issue so that we can get those cups back and yeah, get some people more attracted. And I feel like I said pretty much what I wanted to say over the course of the MP4 issues, and I feel like we've covered
just some
everything.
quick questions though, just so we end this. If let's say people bring up Maniaplanet 4 now with a bad taste and a bad angle, if you could pick, would you go back to Maniaplanet 3 where you had the other bugs but not the server issue bugs, or would you stick to Maniaplanet 4? And if you are Nadeo, should Nadeo care even about fixing Maniaplanet 4, or should they just leave this to quote-unquote die or let it be for the rest of the game's history?
Well, to be fair, I'm gonna adopt. If I was a community member, well, an event organizer, and having discovered the issues firsthand, I would have straight up tried to roll back, ask Nadeo to roll back to MP3. Of course, that would never happened. But if I was the Maniaplanet and Nadeo, then I would adopt what you actually said. I feel like it would be way too much work to actually maintain the platform, and the platform might not be viable anyway. Plus, there's a new game in the works, and all the momentum of the team is actually gravitating towards the new game rather than actually maintaining the platform, which is going to see like slightly reduced effectives or staff rather for actually maintaining the platform with more iterative corrective updates and not really big reworks or big fixes, bug fixes like the lapse script, which is extremely old. So yeah, then that's a bit of my take. If I was a community organizer, I would have asked for a rollback to MP3, but from the Nadeo standpoint, with how things are now, I would straight up abandon MP4 and focus on the new game and try to start on a fresh code base to make sure that things will actually be rock solid in the future.
Yeah, I mean, if I have my take on that, at the very least back at the time, I would have just said, look, you've released an update which is broken. I mean, I recall they released it in the middle of I believe it was in the middle of a TMM tournament. I seem to remember playing a match there, and it was in the semi-finals or so, and when the update actually got pushed out, it was almost impossible to actually play a match. I mean, you couldn't even do rounds properly. Team mode wasn't working properly. So if you're releasing an update, no matter how big it is, no matter how profound it is, if it doesn't work, it should get pushed back to whatever form it originally worked as best as it could in, which was Maniaplanet 3. But they decided to keep going with it. They fixed some of the other issues, and the community got involved to improve the framework. With server controllers and things like that, which patched some of the gaping holes that it really left. But I mean, I don't really expect them to be doing much about it going forward, and whether I'd want them to or not, I'm really not sure. I just want to see the new Trackmania starting off with a nice strong framework. I want to know that if I go into this new Trackmania, I'm not going to be seeing the same mess that comes up with Maniaplanet 4 when that came out. As I said, it was very difficult to play. It was very, very difficult to organise tournaments. If that's the same in the new Trackmania, then I'll certainly be very concerned. But as long as they've got the same framework, they've got a good framework, they've got the sort of base which these tournaments can work from. You can host a weekly event or a weekly mixed-styled event such as a spam weekly race. You can host that there. You're not going to have these such issues that the True Talent Cup was having. They're having people spending hundreds of hours of their own time just trying to get it working even. So I just hope they have that fixed going forward. If that means that they have to kind of sacrifice Trackmania 2 for it, I wouldn't like it, but I'll accept it. I'll accept sacrificing Trackmania 2 to make sure Trackmania 3 is great. That's the kind of way I look at it. Okay,
also, just to quickly address stuff that we are reading in the chat that I wasn't actually aware of. For instance, Terminator 681 on Eirik started saying that they didn't even mention that MP4 completely erased the Canyon Valley leaderboards. That's something I wouldn't have actually been aware of because I didn't own Canyon or Valley at the time that the MP4 was actually pushed. And we also got a few accounts of entire title packs even, and not just servers, being completely broken. We have, for instance, the RPG title pack mentioned by Virtual, or even the F1 title pack, as mentioned by Eirik Andre here, but yeah. I feel like we've... do you have anything more to add, Scotty, or you feel like we've covered everything?
I feel like we've covered everything. Just As I say, let's look forward to see what Trackmania brings, and this might be something we can maybe go back to talk about in the future once we've seen what we've got in store for us when the new game comes out.
Yeah, see how everything fares in the space of a few weeks, months, and then talk about how stable it is now.
Yep.
So I feel like we're done with our first subject. So that is a little bit of a discussion of the Maniaplanet 4 issues done, and now we're ready to attack our second subject. And for this, it's going to be up to Eirik to actually take it home. Now, there's a question for you, Eirik, and for you, the chat. What's Trackmania missing at the moment?
Well, that was my question to you guys before. I obviously have thought about this for a while, and I think this is a pretty open question. I always bring open questions to debate. Last time, my topic ended up speaking for 15 minutes, so hopefully that's not going to be the case for now.
Mm-hmm.
I give you this topic, I believe, before the weekend. So if you had to pick one thing or two things, what is Trackmania missing the most? If there's something you could implement into Trackmania that would help the game the most, what would that be?
Well, something that's missing from Trackmania, I have to go with the integrated matchmaking system. I know this is a kind of a boring answer, basic answer here, but yeah, I feel like a matchmaking stuff for like cup mode, or even just straight over, even just rounds, and not just for the cup mode rule set, would have actually been a banger for the game itself. Because how do you want to actually promote yourself as an easy competitive experience and something that you can actually get competitively easily if you don't have a matchmaking system and you have to rely on the old IRC/Discord, looking for scrims, Discord servers, and whatever? That's a bit of an anti. That would be a bit of an off-putter for newer players in the beginning. That's kind of like what put me off from competing. For example, when I actually got the game after the beta release. When I actually wanted to take part in an ESL tournament, and I didn't know who to contact. I didn't know how IRC worked, and that's the kind of thing. I eventually took part in the competition, but it didn't really work out that well for me. And I felt, yeah, I'm not gonna do that again. Too much hassle to actually get into the thing. But yeah, I feel like matchmaking could definitely be something here. Matchmaking would be huge, as the baller said in the chat, and yeah. Rasta also saying that, bringing an interesting point, that Trackmania is missing marketing. I'd say that Turbo would be the Trackmania Turbo, the unloved child of the Trackmania franchise, is the exception to the rule, because it actually got pushed quite heavily by Ubisoft due to the fact that it was actually a multi-platform game. You had it on PC, PS4, Xbox One, and it actually had some solid backing in the PR and promotion department by Ubisoft staff, and it actually ended up selling well. So I feel like if we even got a fraction of the amount of marketing power that Ubisoft has internationally for the next Trackmania, I feel like we would have a much wider audience by the time it actually hits.
Yeah, well, I suppose if the question is posed to me, I could give two answers to this, but instead I'll kind of go off, not off tangent here, but and take it from a kind of different way. One thing I think Trackmania is really missing, if we kind of look at how the big events, how the big kind of updates get handled, is transparency. So that's what I think Trackmania is missing, is transparency. Now, we've spoke at length last week, we've spoke at length privately, I mean on our streams and all the rest of it, around, say, Trackmania Grand League coming out. We've spoken about, in years gone past, the absence of a World Championship in 2017. We've spoken about some of the issues as in tech dying, so to speak, and with 2018 heralding the last Tech World Championship. We've spoken about how Trackmania, at least recently, is posing a lot of questions with the new game coming out, how that's going to work. You can address there as well with Zerator coming into the game and having his influence being shown when a wave of kind of new content almost was released for in tune with one of his cups. How I would bring transparency into that is, always for each of these points, there's been so many questions that have been unanswered. There's been so many points which the community have wanted clarified that have been unanswered. For example, if I go back to my previous topic, in Maniaplanet 4, why did they not just go back to Maniaplanet 3? We didn't have that communication to tell us that they were working on problems. for the absence of the World Championship in 2017. We didn't have the communication in advance to tell us that was happening. We didn't have the communication to tell us why that was happening. And same for Trackmania Grand League, with the exception of Hillis himself actually coming into the public Discord for a week, it seemed like, to answer questions of which people had. So I think transparency could really benefit Trackmania, as people need to feel like they're cared about. People need to feel like the developers are interested in the problems that people are having. Because at the moment, people feel like they're not being listened to. They feel that their questions aren't being answered, and as such are hesitating in their investment into the game. I mean, the topics we were talking about last week. If you feel like you've got so many concerns and so many problems about a game, you're going to want to ask the right people if this is going to be fixed. How is this going to work? How is that going to work? And that's going to affect that's going to affect your decision making when it comes to making big choices. Like, am I going to participate in tournaments? Am I going to try and host events myself? Am I going to spend more time in Trackmania? Am I going to continue to spend Trackmania? Spend time in Trackmania. But one of the most important questions I'm sure they'll care about: am I even going to bother buying the game? So, my answer to that would be transparency.
Yeah, I would actually go with, if I look at it from my point of view, I would name that marketing and getting new players into the game would be number one. Because if you don't have marketing, okay, let's say that you have perfectly fine matchmaking, but you don't have a way to actually bring in new people that will try out this marketing and then eventually improve, then it only helps the people that are in Trackmania. And I think we all agree that the player base in Trackmania at the moment is way too small. It's mainly French-speaking players that is coming up, and we have, if you talk about, yesterday, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, I asked in this Norwegian Discord if players there would be open for attending a Norwegian LAN event if I was able to fix it with Ubisoft Nordic. Most of them even said no. So even if you look at my own country and the player base in this country is way too small to actually host something. So I would say, if I just look into the future and look at the next important months, marketing would be the main thing. And then if you look at the game overall and what feature in the game I'm missing, then obviously matchmaking is the thing I miss. And like Virtual mentioned up, and something that Phyllis mentioned in the interview I did with him, is that players, after they play for a while, they don't know how to see that they get better. They don't have like a goal to strive for. They maybe try for some local records, maybe go on another map, basically hunt for some medals. They don't really know how to know. Let's say that if I talk with a friend, we're both casual players, he say, how good are you in Trackmania? And what should I say then? I'm like 0.8 behind the world record.
Exactly.
I have three world records. What should you tell someone?
You got no way to track your progression in terms of the things you learned and stuff like that. Like, of course, that would require specific tutorials for different techniques, but of course, there's techniques. I was rewatching a few stuff, like especially trying to prepare my my own topic for today, and the techniques aren't intended by the developers, so they are more. They were discovered by the community, so it will be more community relying on community people to actually prepare tutorials for the entire game. Of course, we've seen the community contribute to a game in a Trackmania game before. That was the case with Trackmania Turbo, with a few players actually going in to actually help with the and actually set Super Trackmaster medals and stuff like that. So I feel like it's not too far of a stretch to actually try and see some people from the community actually being brought in by Nadeo and try to write specific like driving school sections where you know the basics of tech, where you learn how to neo drift, where you learn how to speed slide if you want a more full speed oriented section. That would be something that would actually be a pretty good way of actually giving a sense of progression to the player.
Yeah, and then you bring up content there. That I also agree that is missing from the current scene. It's not a lot of content out there for players besides maybe a stream or world record content, but just something once you get into Trackmania that you know that once you log in, there is something that the game wants you to do, and that is to progress as a player, that is to get better and better and eventually just spend more and more time in Trackmania. So I believe many people try Trackmania, maybe many people think it's fun, But once you reach a point where, okay, now it's fun, but how can I keep this being fun?
They easily get bored.
Yeah, how can I know that I'm good? Should I tell my friends I have 2 world records? Everybody can get world records in Trackmania. Just make our own track and not let anybody else play it.
Yeah, exactly.
You say that you have 300 world records on TMX and say that you claim to be the best player, but you
how to cheat the world record system 101.
I believe the guy with the most world records on TMX is like a guy that I maybe could beat even on some tracks. So if you just upload enough world records there, you can claim to be somewhat of a good player when in reality you are not. So if you guys think about matchmaking just specifically, I think we all agree that that is something that's missing. How should matchmaking work? Should it be like just queue up with, you press play, queue up with people around your level? Should it be, how should the ideal matchmaking system work?
Well, the thing is, you bring up level of players, but the thing is, we haven't really. We have a community-driven matchmaking system with ASAC, and when we were actually maintaining it. But the thing is, which kind of rating would you actually want to actually pick for actually the internal matchmaking? Would it be MMR based? Would it be like skill rating, like an Overwatch or stuff like that? That would be one of the main areas to work on. Now, going off onto another subject of departing slightly from our subject currently, question by Athol for us. Do you think the new game should be free to play to attract more players? If yes, why? If no, why not? Well, I would agree. I would actually be on board if the game was free to play, but I wouldn't want it to actually be in the same vein as Nations Forever, for instance, where the game is free to play, but when you get online, you got the concept of free zone that kind of ruins the entire experience. Basically, you play for 5 rounds, and after the 5th round, no, you're out. You're forced to inspect for 1 round, and after that, you play 5 rounds again. I was never really on board with that limitation to begin with. I feel like to actually make the multiplayer part where you actually log into the, be able to actually go to the servers and play as long as you like, free to play, with a little bit of a section of the campaign, that would be something that I would be down for, like only having, like, for example, the white flags or white plus green flags of the solo campaign so that you can actually have a little bit of solo material to work with. And once you've played all through the white and green tracks, you would be able to the game would say, hey, if you want to unlock the entire campaign, that's $5 or $10 or something like that. That would be something easy to do. I feel like that's the kind of model that we should actually be going for. Of course, there might be a few people cringing when I say that, but that's just my personal opinion. If you guys have a different opinion, then be my guest.
Could Trackmania be free? I mean, it has, in a sense, worked in the past, as you were saying there with the Nations. I would be interested to see how it would work, because they are planning on coming into this game with a kind of support to it, with regular tournaments and things like this, and a kind of seasonal campaign, almost, so to speak. I believe that was the words that were used when they were initially describing this. There is many ways of, because the thing we need to consider is this. Of course, we as the players may want this game to be free to play, but we also as players understand that the developers will want to make, publishers, developers, whoever it is, will want to make money off of this. So that means they will have to find some way to monetize it out of the game. That could be advertisements, that could be the purchase cost, that could be microtransactions, whatever it's going to be. We of course all understand that does mean that they will need to monetize it somehow. Now, through that, I mean, I've seen, at least through how I work, I work at least in similar types of at least environments with esports, in the sense that companies run premium tournaments, for example, and a kind of matchmaking format. As example, if Trackmania has your weekly tournaments or something like that, then they could have free tournaments which would have, say, a planet's prize pool if they have some sort of currency like that, and then premium paid for tournaments that can have a regular cash prize going towards it. Can also help crowdfund some events or something like that. But even if it's not going to be free to play, I would like to see the game being relatively low in price, as that also opens up, if they do decide to go in some sort of venture again in the same way they did with Turbo, in the sense of making it multi-platform, which I also think is something that should be considered. your people who are multi-platform may not have been exposed as much to Trackmania, maybe Turbo, of course, but they've not been the kind of people who have went in the journey with us through, Nations and United and so on. Or maybe if they did, it's a long forgotten memory, perhaps. But I mean, making the game free or making it relatively cheap will open up the doors for more people to come in from different walks of life that we've not had in Trackmania yet.
Now, I'm seeing a few questions,
Yeah, but can we just take the questions at the end? Because if not, we're gonna interrupt different topics. Like say you do speedruns and then we do two topics.
No. It's in regards to the pricing stuff. It's not really questions. It's more opinions that I've seen from the chat. Zai, about the suggestion that I have, locking the campaign down behind a paywall, at least part of the campaign down behind a paywall, would be kind of like a EA in a sense, where it's just microtransaction related. The thing is, if you're looking at trying to implement microtransaction in the game, that's kind of like the only way I can actually see that happening. Because if you try to lock the skin market down, or try to make money off of horns or stuff like that, which is actually something that is kind of sacred in some way with Trackmania, the way you can actually pretty much make your own skin if you want with the painter, on how you can have quality skins with the skinners like Shumi, Onto, Groove, Born, and people, Pax, and people like that. If we take the entire that entire thing and lock it out behind closed doors with Nadeo curating the skins, that might be something to get more income, but that might actually lose an entire pane of creativity in Trackmania. That is actually something that is actually cherished by some people. Heck, we have an award of the year for that. And yeah, that would be kind of a shame of actually having that kind of creativity just separated from the entire game and be completely lost. That's just my kind of final take on this thing.
I mean, I think Hiller said that Trackmania Turbo was their biggest success, and I think that maybe that's from a financial standpoint as well. So I don't expect this to be free at all. They want some sort of security in the income, and so yeah, I don't believe it's free. Of course, I want it to be free because then it's a less of a hurdle for people to actually try it. It's free. Let's download it. Let's play with some friends, and if it's fun, we stick around. But I don't believe it's gonna be free. But we don't know.
We don't know yet. Only time will tell. Of course, there are some people bringing up the argument that people would create official skins. Now, I could community people could create official skins. Now, I'd actually be down with that as long as we don't actually get a kind of pure server check a la CSGO, where if you modify the game files with something that is not authorized by the servers, then you get absolutely kicked out of the server and you can't play online. That's the main thing that's I'm kind of worrying here. Now, of course, we could have a system a la CSGO where we could actually have a basically a submission guide for community-driven, community-made skins that could eventually make it their way to the game and have be integrated in the battle pass system that Danik was actually thinking about, thus eliminating the need for locking down the campaign behind the paywall. Now, with the way that you've actually phrased it a little bit later, both Danik B and Virtual, Danik B in my chat and Virtual in Eirik's chat, then I feel like I would be down to see potentially some skins being actually having to pay for skins. For instance, if for instance you have a community-made skin, let's say you got an adaptation of, for instance, a mouse skin, like the new Neon Rider from Steel series. If you get an adaptation of that as a Trackmania skin in itself, and you would pay like $3 or $4, I'd be totally down for that. It's just that I don't feel if we go that route, we should not go all in and lock the entire thing down and leave it to other creators to actually be able to create their own stuff and showcase it to the world. That's the main thing.
But I think you have, if you look at the history of Trackmania, even from the moment they released Trackmania Nations Forever for free, it's sort of like within the community, it's a mentality that everything should be free. Even some players are sticking to Trackmania Nations Forever because they don't want to pay the $5 or whatever it is to play Trackmania 2. So if you start now requesting more and more that you have to pay for this, you have to pay for that, you're not gonna make people happy, and
that's going to be a big turn off.
Just going to make them like, okay, I'm just going to stick in Trackmania Nations Forever then, because here everything is free, here everything is as it's always been, here the nostalgia. So the more stuff you add for people, you want more and more money from you. Why should they bother then if they're happy hunting maps in Trackmania Nations Forever like they have been now for, I don't know, the last 10 years?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Now, I feel like we've covered what we wanted to actually see in Trackmania. Of course, I personally think that an integrated matchmaking system would be great, along with a bit of a marketing push, as pointed out by some of the viewers. Scottie felt like a bit more transparency would be needed in regards to some of the big decisions made by Nadeo. And you, Eirik, wanted to actually see potentially a big marketing push to try and get new people into the game, and also a bit better sense of progression, as per Virtual said in the chat. So I feel like we've covered pretty much everything there is on what's missing from Trackmania at the present moment.
Yep.
Alrighty then, and that leads me to my own subject, which is a little bit different. A little bit of a, well, niche topic. I know I'm gonna offend some people, but it's something a bit of a departure from what we actually, cover here. And now we're gonna be taking a little look at the speedruns in Trackmania. Now, for some people might thinking, what? Speedruns in a racing game? It's not really that much of a popular thing. Well, Mario Kart has its speedruns. Well, of course, these are the exceptions that actually confirm the rule. But yeah, Trackmania has actually had a pretty active speedrunning community, and still has an active speedrunning community running various titles. And in fact, we've had a few offline speedruns in a few marathons. I've got my runner here, I got my notes. So yeah, the offline speedrun stuff, we had Spam actually taking part in speedruns himself at ESA in 2017, and at the TwitchCon ESA 2019. He speedruns the Trackmania 2 Stadium in the all flags category, which means every single track from AO1 to EO5. First time in 2017 he did it in 125.53, and the other time he actually shaved the whole 2 minutes off of his time with a 123, almost 3 minutes with a 23.05. Then fast forward to 2019 and the ESA Summer Edition. Now, we're gonna see that we had actually two speedruns from two different games, and those are not TM2 Stadium. First of all, we had Nations Forever, which has been speedrunned by Virtual, the man himself, speedrunning Nations Forever in the All Tracks No EO5 category, and showcasing a few bullshit. Showcasing a few fun cuts along the way, and yeah, in the end it ended up with a 106.59, just below the 107 mark, with the estimate being around 115. So that was a really good job, and yeah, which was pretty well received overall by the people that were actually present in the audience. And yeah, then we also had another speedrun, and that was from Riolu. Now, Riolu was actually submitting Trackmania Turbo. That was, remember, ESA Summer happened a few months after the clean sweep of Riolu had ended, the moment where Riolu had all of his 200 world records on Trackmania Turbo, and he decided to actually do an all-flag speedrun as well, with on the PC release of the game. Basically, all tracks from 001 to 200. And compared to Trackmania Nations Forever, speedrunning Turbo is much longer than it actually looks, because yeah, you've got like 40 tracks, oh, what is it, 50 tracks per environment, and then you got multiply that by 4. You see how much depth the game has compared to TMNF, plus the different kind of skills you have to actually put through depending on the environment. It can actually be kind of complicated, especially with the new tricks that Lagoon introduced, such as the drag boost with the magnet blocks that actually allowed you to get a little bit off in the air when you were actually going downwards to get a bit more speed. Those are some of the techniques that were involved in the speedruns. You did it 6 times. Do you know how it feels? Okay, so we got Rasta in the chat, the main admin of the speedrunning community, who also runs the speedrun.com leaderboards. And yeah, as for Riolu's speedrun, it ended with a 3 hour, 57 minutes and 30-second time in the end. So yeah, pretty lengthy run, although the way underestimate, since estimate was, as you can see on the screen, at 4 hours and 30 minutes, which was planned to be actually much longer. And I feel like I'm not really sure about that, because I feel like outside of the speedrun.com leaderboards, that is actually the best time we've seen so far on Trackmania Turbo in real-time attack. Now, I have to explain real-time attack. Real-time attack is basically taking the time that it takes from when you actually start the speedrun by pressing start on 001, and it ends when you cross the line in 200, and you actually count in the loading times and whatever. That's real-time attack. There's another way to actually to actually calculate time, and that is in-game time. Now there is a little bit of a piece of software that is actually available as a resource in the Trackmania Speedrun forums called the in-game time calculator, where you basically input all of the times from each and every one of your tracks, and it basically adds them all together to give you the total time that you spent with the entire tracks, with only the track times running, and not just the loading times and whatever. So yeah, you can see the final, the end of the run here for Riolu, which actually caused him a bit of problems with the final jump, the final loop jump here, causing quite a bit of trouble to Mr. Streamer. But in the end, he managed to get it work done and crosses the line in a few seconds time. There we go, final loop jump, and time 3:57.37 in the end for that particular speedrun. Now, in terms of other people, so yeah, Rasta is the main administrator of the Trackmania speedrun community, along with Darklink940. It must actually be noted, the two people actually run the leaderboards on speedrun.com. Yet fellow Norwegian player who actually holds a bunch of records in one of the other games that I'm gonna present in a little bit. Don't worry, it's gonna be quick. So yeah, we do have environment. Basically, almost all the games are there except for two, Sunrise and Original, because nobody has actually bothered to actually run the games yet. Let's hope that this season change. So to give you a rundown of the all flag speedruns in, for instance, Stadium, on the leaderboard of Trackmania Stadium on speedrun.com, it is Nick Soltica, American player from Team 300, who actually holds the world record with the 1 hour 12 minute 1 second and 1/100th of a second. So 1 hour 12 minutes 01.010. That's actually time attack with that's actually the time calculated without the loading. And with the loads, it's actually the working out to a 114.20. As for TMNF, it is actually Virtual, who still holds the world record with the in the All Flags No EO5 category, with a 1 hour 4 minute and 45 seconds in real time, and in-game time, it is actually a sub 1 hour time. It is a 58:30.880. Now, you're seeing that it's not exactly the run that we're watching now. This is something that is interesting. It's basically a Trackmania race around the green tracks as part of a marathon of speedrunning called l'Ultime Décathlon, which is actually a French organized speedrun tournament where basically you have to learn 10 different games to actually be the fastest and actually complete the fastest the game as fast as possible in certain categories. And in Ultime Décathlon number 7 in 2019, it was actually part of the Trackmania 2 Stadium was actually part of that map packet. I think it was the 4th game that was actually being run. So yeah, the category used here was not the all flags, it was only a single series that was run, and that is the green flag series, so from B1 to B15. And as you can see, there was actually a pretty tight race through and through, even though we had a bunch of different, a few different players' skill when it came to the game itself. As you can see, from Stefla crossing the finish line in a bit of a little bit late compared to, for instance, Doremi, Devil Tifa, and Taker, who are the people who took part in the grand final of the Ultimate Decathlon that year, which was actually played at the Stuntfest festival in Rennes. And in the end, it was Taker who won the race with a time of, actually, if I actually wrote it down here, it was an 11:31, if I recall correctly, after the calculation was done by the for the in-game time. And yeah, Taker taking it briefly from Devil Tifa and Stefla, and Noremi actually crossing the line in last place. Now, in terms of the of another game that I really wanted to actually talk about, that's kind of like a brief overview of the speedrun scene, of what's actually been done in the speedrun scene for Trackmania so far. And now let's actually talk about a bit of a loopy line. So, imagine if you're in 2009 and you're wondering, man, Trackmania looks fun, but I don't have a PC. On which platforms can I get it? Well, there was actually a alternative version of the game, as you can see right now, and it has actually been developed for the Wii console, and it's also been developed for the DS, which we saw the early edition of Turbo being released in 2010 for the DS, and this game released shortly thereafter called Trackmania Wii. And as you can see, it's completely wacky as shit. All of these shortcuts that you could pull that have actually been discovered by Riolu over the past few weeks, in the crazy shortcuts compilation that are now available on his channel, which I'm using as a backing track. You see the Desert B5 here, the first cut in this video, and yeah, some people have actually took a liking to actually on TMWE and found it as a fun game, and yeah, Riolu has actually been taking quite a liking with his clean sweep series of streams where he tried to get the world record on pretty much every single track, although it didn't really work out that far for him. He's currently on the 117 world records so far, and look at the shortcut here. Zoop! Clipping through the ground. That's basically a normal thing in this game. One thing to note is that the Nadeo was the one commending this game and actually using the assets of Trackmania United Forever, but the physics engine has been programmed by a third party. This is not the Nadeo physics engine, it's actually a physics engine called Octane, made by Firebrand Games, which has been used for both this version on Wii and for both games on the Nintendo DS. And you can see that the physics are quite a bit different, with a lot more bounce and also a few of the textures not having a solid plane, so cars can fall through them. It's actually completely wacky as shit. I would recommend actually trying out at least trying out either the DS version or the Wii version much better, because you can actually get it to run pretty good on an emulator, or if you have a Wii yourself and have the then you should probably buy a used copy of the game and try it yourself. But yeah, it's a way different experience compared to even United Forever on the PC. For instance, Coast is the most shocking example. In United Forever, if you go above 85 miles an hour on 85 kilometers an hour on Coast and you turn, basically going to drift and go into the outside wall, which is why I hate Coast with a passion, by the way. Whereas in the Wii version, it is a hell of a lot more grippy than on the PC version, thus enabling you to take corners at like 160 instead of 80. So yeah, it makes some pretty wacky experiences, including this shortcut right here, where basically you take the checkpoint, turn around, and then look at the checkpoint he pulls off. So as you see here, no collision of the poles. Normally that would have been an instant rip if there was a PC version, but no, here you basically just go through. That's the best thing I've ever seen. This, if you want to see the shortcut compilations by Riolu, they're on his channel. Trackmania Wii Crazy Shortcuts #1 and #2. #2 being dropped a few days ago. And yeah, that is actually some pretty good shit and some pretty fat reroutes sometimes by the being discovered by players. And in terms of the sit rep of the Trackmania Wii scene at the moment, it's mostly individual level runs, or IL runs as we call them. So mainly the kind of standard hunting down the tracks that you would see on TM Stadium. For instance, Kappa doing the hunting EO3 at the moment in TM2S, or even the AO1 world record that was broken on United Forever. As you can see, the hole-in-one by Riolu, scoring him in a sub 27 second time. And yeah, for the IL runs, Riolu holds 117 world records overall in the Speedrun.com Trackmania Wii leaderboard. The next one, the closest one is actually Nursens from Poland, and he holds 34 world records. Although most of his world records are held in the puzzle tracks that are actually still a thing in Trackmania Wii, and also he holds pretty much all of the Stadium D track records, D1 through D4, are held by Nursens. And Darklink, one of the admins of the Trackmania speedrunning community, holds 17 world records, so you can see there's quite a bit of a gap between Riolu and the rest of the pack. And thing to be noted is that Darklink holds 17 world records, and he holds most of them in the platform tracks. There are a total of, I think, 10 or 11 platform tracks. Let me actually check that real quick from the IL board. Yeah, there are actually 21 tracks in total. And yeah, he holds records on I think around 14 or 15 of them, with a few other records held in puzzle as well. So yeah, Darklink, not too shabby, even though, yeah, Riolu's pretty much overshadowed everything in terms of record holding. Now, if you want to be a bit more educated about the speedrun scene in itself in Trackmania, I can wholeheartedly recommend you to check out the Speedrun.com Trackmania series page, where you basically have the listings for games from the original Nations ESWC game all the way until Trackmania Turbo and even Trackmania Lagoon. And if you want to actually get in touch with Rasta Bobby or even Darklink or some of the other speedrunning members and actually discover some of the fat reroutes that have been discovered on the TM Wii, for instance, or discuss other Trackmania games, then there is also the TM Speedrun Discord. Now, fun fact, I actually speedran a Trackmania game myself, and that was back 4 years ago. It was Trackmania Nation's ESWC, and I did the beginner track speedrun, so from A1 to from A0 to C9, if I recall the track names correctly. And fun fact, I still hold the world record in that category, although not by much. Let me just check the leaderboard right here. Where is it? If I can actually find it. Trackmania series. Go back to ESWC. The page wants to load. Thank you. Yeah, I'm kind of working with a bit of a shoddy internet for browsing pages, but I can still stream, so that's fine. There we go. The time I did was a 9:29.57. That was real time attack. 9 minutes and 29 seconds. There we go. I'm still at the top of the leaderboard by a full minute compared to Darklink on real time, but in in-game time, it's actually not that wide of a gap, because I did a 6:00.540, so a 6 minute point 54 hundredths of a second, but Darklink did a 6 minutes 01, so 6 minute 1 second 0.860. So so we're quite a bit closer compared to when you compare it in real time attack, and the record still stands after I submitted it, which was, let me check the submit date. That's going to be closing the stream after that, don't worry about it. February 29th, 2016, damn. That makes me feel old already. I was 19 when that, I wasn't even 19 when I actually made this, holy crap. So yeah, I feel like I gave a fair bit of an overview of the speedrunning state of speedrunning community, and also the kind of wacky things that are actually up there in the Trackmania speedrun scene. So as once again, I can only recommend that you watch the speedruns, for instance, by Virtual on TMNF or Riolu on TN Turbo, or even Spam speedruns on Trackmania 2 Stadium. And if you want to actually learn more about the speedrunning community itself, there's the speedrun.com page of the Trackmania series and the Trackmania speedrun community Discord, which has been spammed by Rasta in my own chat right now. So yeah, I've covered pretty much everything there is to cover. I hope that the members of the speedrunning community are okay with what I've actually presented, and I hope I didn't say too much bullshit. But yeah, I feel like this is pretty much it. Do you have any questions in the chat regarding any of the subjects that we discussed, such as the MP4 server issues and how we can fix them, the speedrunning community, for instance, or what actually you feel Trackmania would be missing? We can take a few questions in, and after that, we're going to close the stream off.
But something that is important to mention about the speedrun is the only reason why I care about speedruns. Because let's be honest, the speedruns like Riolo, Virtual, and Spam did, when you have like loading time coming into play, I don't see that as something good, because then it's basically who has the faster PC, who has the faster loading time wins. Because the difference between who is a good driver and a bad driver in Trackmania can be like under a second. So then it's loading time. But the good thing about the speedruns is the amount of viewers they bring in. If you just Google, or if you just YouTube search for Trackmania at the moment and go to most viewed videos within the last 12 months, the run Virtual did is number 3 with 430,000 views.
Yeah,
and then Riolo is
insane.
number 10 on that list. So the numbers that speedrun brings into Trackmania is insane. But speedrunning as a competition and as something I'm not too fan of. I watched both of them. I even had Kappa on a holiday here in Norway, but I still prioritize to watch Riolo do it, because it's something that takes place in Trackmania and something that's interesting. But competition, maybe if you do it without the loading times, then it's fun. But besides that, not something I really care about.
Yeah, so yeah, we had you said that of course it would be the race of who is the better PC when you're actually using RTA. That's the main problem. And Rasta saying that there's actually a script for the split, the program called Live Split, which we use in speedrunning to basically take the splits at H in every track, which basically stops the timer when you get into a loading screen and only restarts it as soon as you're into the track and actually have started and gained control of your car. So that's actually there are actually workarounds being used to circumvent the fact that RTA can be playing a huge factor, especially with different configurations. a question from Beltram. Do you think speedruns can attract more people to the game, even if not down to speedrun the game, considering that TM has a huge learning curve? I feel that yes, of course, because Trackmania, some people do hear about it and they feel it's good, but sometimes they don't feel like, well, yeah, I heard of that, but I don't really know what it's about. You show them a speedrun and they're like, oh, that's actually pretty sweet. Some people are actually in love with the game. I've actually viewed the game, the speedrun by Virtual 430,000 times, and Ryalu's Trackmania Turbo speedrun, although it's a different game, has been close to 100k last time I checked. So yeah, it will definitely bring a bunch of other people into the game. Speedrunners are good because they show the entire game at once, and the competitions will focus on a single competitive style. Terminator 681 making a very good point here, because yeah, you can actually cover and get some good coverage for Ran League, From Zero to Hero, TMO Dirt Cup, Full Speed League Glitch Edition, but that's only focusing on one tiny bit of the community or the driving style at a time, whereas if you get a full game speedrun, you get the entire panel of possibilities of driving that you have in Trackmania. Okay, I've got a question coming in from SRK here. When do you think will there be country-based competitions like the Nations Cup we had a few years back? Now that would be something that would be more towards the maybe right up your alley, Scotty, since it's more involved towards tech. So I'm not really that well placed to actually talk for Nations Cup and stuff like that.
Nations Cups have in history been organised by a few different. I mean, we had it before. The SDC would organise an NC to go along with it. I believe the TMS guys get involved in the Nations Cup scene. It's really anyone's guess coming up to it soon. I can't recall exactly who done it last time, and it was about a year ago now, I want to say, when the last cup was. So I'd imagine there's going to be a little bit of a break between tournaments for the next one coming up because of the new Trackmania, or perhaps with the new Trackmania you want to get your first Nations Cup done nice and quick to introduce new people to the game with the country that they're part of and that they'll feel represented by. But I don't think it's going to happen for a little bit of a while. I don't think a lot of tournaments are going to happen for a while when the new Trackmania comes out, but I can definitely imagine why SRK is feeling a little bit better for it after a successful Baltic Team Cup and a good effort in getting that region, breathing a bit of life into that region. But I'd like to see more teams, more nations getting involved this year, or well, in the next Trackmania tournament. But I don't really see that happening through the most recent times for Trackmania. It's good that we would only have one team per nation, or else probably half of the tournament would be made up by French people. But yeah, I mean, I think it will maybe come at the end of the year. If not, it'll be the start of next year.
Okay.
Something that the Nations Cup highlights, though, is that how few people actually play for each country, like at the top level. I mean, did even UK with you and Pac have a team?
We had a team of me and Pac.
Exactly, yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. I think there was maybe one or two other people we spoke to like bring them out of retirement, but actively it's realistically me and Pac, which is a situation that far too many countries find themselves in.
I mean, if you look at the winning country with then Czech and Slovakia, they even had to mix the two countries back together, Czechoslovakia, to win it. So it's a Nations Cup, but the nation or the team that won it was two nations being together as one. So I think Trackmania needs to be a lot bigger for it to be really a Nations Cup. If not, it's just basically Netherlands, Germany, and France who has a big enough player reach over
and Czech
five
Republic,
competitive players.
And Czech Republic combined to Slovakia. Because
Yeah,
there's a
then
pretty
you
big-
have to combine it with Slovakia. It's
Yeah,
like saying
yeah,
Norway is a
essentially,
big
yeah, that's-
country if you combine it with Denmark, Sweden, Finland. So it's a Nations Cup, so it has to be one nation, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Also- okay, I do have. Okay, I got one more question from SRK. There was actually Matthew Chadwell who had another question as well, but someone in the chat actually gave a bit of a hint. Why is there such an emphasis on LANs? I'm from the US and there is a 0% chance I could ever get to one. I believe that emphasizing online tournaments is infinitely better. Sure, but yeah, Terminator's saying that there are entire continents where TM is pretty much unknown, unfortunately. That is the case, for instance, when you go outside of Europe. It's not known in Asia. It's not really known in North America. Although, Carl Jr. does have a word about that. Canada does have a word about that, but that's kind of like the exception that confirms the rule. There are not many players from the United States. There are not many players from Mexico. We do have a few Brazilian players, but that's it. So yeah, there are. When emphasis on lands can actually make it much better for European players, you're sure, but I feel like it's also potentially a mark of investment in the game, when you actually get to go to a LAN event. Of course, that's maybe not be a valid reason of why there's an emphasis on LANs, but also there's another pretty simple answer: netcode. With when you get to abroad connections and messing with 100 pings, you can basically see cars zipping through all around. It's basically just a mess, especially if you have a tournament that, for instance, wants a LAN-like experience that forces cars on. That just pretty much destroys the experience for pretty much everybody involved. So yeah. Okay, one final question about, I feel, I'm gonna take the one from Aethel here. I'm gonna cover everything here, sorry guys. You mentioned that players need a sense of progression while playing. Do you have any ideas on how to make this possible?
Yeah, matchmaking, right? Wasn't that what we agreed on? Like, when you can play against players that are around your level, and then you essentially go up a rank or down a rank. So let's say you go up a rank, then you play against new players at that rank, and then if you eventually win enough there, go up a rank again. So once my friend asked me, how good are you in Trackmania, I can say, yeah, I'm ranked 12 out of, I don't know, what to say, 50 or something like that. So you have a certain number you can say.
I mean, how about another kind of suggestion here? Now, we've seen through the Nadeo campaigns, they've had that kind of a skill point system through this. Now, I can imagine why some people wouldn't want this. Some people, of course, especially in the competitive community. But imagine if you drove a map, whether you drove it online, whether you drove it offline, no matter what server you drove it on, it tracked what time you done, and it had some sort of skill point associated with that. So that, say for example, I go and drive ESL Hawkalicious, then whatever time I get, whether I drive it offline or whether I drive it in my own server, whatever, then I'll be able to get some sort of amount of skill points on that based upon how well I finish compared to how everyone else finishes. That would be a mess to incorporate into Trackmania 2 now, because there's just simply too much backdating to do. There's too many times that have been done on these maps.
Yeah,
but imagine if, of course, new Trackmania comes out, and then each map you do a time on, it's got its own ranking system, at the very least, like a sort of Mania Exchange thing, as Ryder's pointing out in my chat, except instead, or also a Dedi Mania thing like they have for online servers. Just have one kind of universal ranking system at the very least for tracking your own progression, and then players, of course, can use their own times when it gets to online, when it gets to them wanting to compare in time attack or something like that. It's a bit of a kind of a hotfix, so to speak, just kind of shoehorning in a ranking, but it goes to show, I mean, well, it might not be the best option, there's definitely options there, you know.
But,
well,
yeah, then again, you can just drive a lot of world records like this guy is doing on TMX.
Yeah, just create your own map, submit, post
So
it
it
on
has to be
TMX,
like
upload a replay on TMX on the same map, job done, and make it locked.
But it has to be like Nadeo is doing then. With the more people that play it, the more points you get. So let's say Hawkalicious is the most hunted map. If you get the world record there, it's gonna matter more than if you hunt your own map and not rigging the system.
Yeah, of course, we already talked about this on what's missing from Trackmania, and yeah, I do agree with, I already stated that I was kind of like of a basic bitch opinion that matchmaking is really what's needed. Rank matchmaking would definitely help in terms of like having a sense of progression. Kind of like how like, of course, that's kind of a bad example because the ranks in CS:GO don't really mean anything nowadays, but for instance, in CS:GO, back in the days where you can have decent matchmaking matches, you could actually say, oh, what's your level in CS? Oh, I'm actually Master Guardian Elite. What's your level? Oh, I'm DMG. We're around the same level. We can actually queue together. Okay, cool. Let's go. You don't get the chance with Trackmania, and if Trackmania could actually implement that, for instance, what's actually your level? Oh, I've got a A license, and I'm like, oh, I've got an A+ license. Maybe we can actually queue and actually get a match, and if you beat me, then you actually graduate. Like, sure, let's do it. That would be something that would actually be cool to see. But yeah, I feel like that's.
But last question from me though. I believe both of you are a player, and Scottie is like a high level player. what kind of maps should be used in a matchmaking system? Should it be the official campaign? Should it be linked to Trackmania Grand League? Should it be linked to events? What maps should we actually play? Because I don't personally believe that we should have like, okay, I want to matchmaking tech, I want to matchmaking full speed, I want to matchmaking dirt. I don't think the game is big enough to separate players. I think you have to just play a certain amount of maps that are in one map pack. So once you place that, you have to play those maps, because at the moment Trackmania is far too small to I have to wait until players sign up for dirt, because then it's maybe 20 minutes waiting time.
Yeah, I think the Trackmania community is a bit too spread for something like that.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, we've seen for some of the biggest competitions that some of these environments have done, or some of these styles, pardon me, that they've just not had enough players to facilitate a really, really high level tournament. I mean, there's always going to be players who have not decided to show up or something like that. But of course, something I would suggest as a solution to that would just simply be mixed maps. I mean, it doesn't need to be a super, a 40-second long map. It can be a multi-style map with, dirt tech and full speed, for example, having RPG elements in it. I would go away from the Trackmania Grand League side of things, as I've had my own disagreements with how the identities and things like that work, and I don't think that would belong in a matchmaking system. But I mean, some sort of basic multi-style map that will allow the players to, once they know the pack, they can pick and ban based upon their preferences. I mean, say this map has a little bit more dirt, so if they're playing against a player who is a dirt specialist, then they might decide to ban that map, for example, if that's something that would come into it. But again, there's ways it can be done. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, to close it out on all this, yeah, you're absolutely right. There are ways that actually be done. And you guys are absolutely right, and I do agree with the fact that the community is way too small to actually have a system of different map pools a la CS, where basically, okay, you've got a competitive Nadeo one, you got a competitive tech, you got a competitive dirt, and competitive full speed. It's basically splitting the community way too much if you adopt an approach like that. I feel like an approach of a map pool a la Overwatch, where you basically get to have a few multi-style, get you to use multi-style maps. Around length can vary between 40 to 60 seconds, but the proportion of styles on each map can vary. For instance, you can have a multi-style map that's a little bit dirt heavy. You can have multi-style maps that are tech heavy, and so on and so forth. That can actually bring a little bit of variety and still give people potentially room to breathe, and then you put in a few neutral maps that have like an equal proportion of dirt tech full speed, for instance. That would actually bring a little bit of variety to the competitive experience, and actually based on that particular map pool, which is fixed and can actually fixed for a certain amount of time, like 3 or 4 months, and can actually rotate once every 2 times a year or 3 times a year. Then you can actually decide to actually train certain maps, and with the pick and ban system in place, you can decide to pick, ban, decide whether or not you decide to want to play a BO1 match or a BO3 match. There's a lot of ways that matchmaking could work, and that just needs to actually basically write down a paper and try to approach kind of like spaghetti, like basically throw different formats at the wall and see what sticks. That's basically the kind of format adopting. Although rolling out officially, I wouldn't have took that approach, to be honest. I'd rather put that in a beta channel or whatever, but yeah, that's a bit of a digression. Anyways, I feel like this is going to be it for this episode. Thank you very much, both Scottie and Eirik, for being here and having a cracking time. And I hope that we're going to have such a cracking time next week as well.
Yeah, thanks for once again hosting this, and we'll be back next Tuesday. And if people have any suggestions about certain topics, make sure to hit us up, because some of the questions people are hitting us up in the chat with are maybe too big to actually be answered at the end of the show and should rather be our own topic. So feel free to suggest any topic. Hit me up in DM, hit Scottie up in DM, and I guess GGeek also wants to be hit up in DM. So
yeah,
make sure to hit us up.
Yeah, and if you want to actually have any, and if you guys have actually had any feedback in terms of how the stream looks, I hope everything went good today. The internet didn't go down, so that's one good thing. But if you got suggestions potentially of how potentially we could make our setup look, or how, for instance, the clip scene could look, for instance, we could do a little bit of work in there. But yeah, if you guys have any idea of what you would want to see implemented in terms of visual stuff in the stream, and have a little bit of feedback of stuff that can be improved, Don't hesitate to hit me up in my TMs on Twitter at TMGGeek, or just hit me up on Discord. GGeek, it's pretty much simple to find. Anyways, for that moment, that's been Eirik Holdal, that's been Paul Gillies, aka Scottie, and that's been Thomas Mancozy, aka GGeek. This has been episode 2 of Let's Talk Trackmania. We'll see you next time. Godspeed, people. See ya.